My name's Christopher Ames, and I have been in music my whole life. I was on the road for 23 years as a solo act. I've been the lead singer and guitar player for the Christopher Ames Band for the last 10 years or so. Currently now, in addition to all that, I'm the store manager here at the Guitar Center, one of 7 guitar stores in Syracuse, which I think is a really cool thing, because there's a whole bunch of music stores for any kind of musician in this town, and I think that's a really incredible fact. So today I'm here with Making Music magazine, and we've been talking about a variety of things, but one of the things we wanted me to talk about was just tips for finding amplifiers. And working in a store like this, obviously, I've got people coming in all day long, from complete novice to old road dogs, and everybody's looking for a new sound. Everybody's looking for that tool to make them just that much better. And it doesn't matter if you've been playing forever or not. I mean, even myself, I just traded in my amp to get a new amp because I'm always trying to get closer to what I hear in my head, and that's always the struggle. So today we're going to talk about a few tips about what you might be looking for when you're looking at amplifiers. Probably the biggest difference you'll hear, people talk about solid state amplifiers versus tube amplifiers versus hybrid amplifiers, and what does all that mean? When you're just starting out, it doesn't mean anything at all. As long as you've got a guitar and a cable and an amp to plug into, you get to make noise. And that's where we start. And then as you get into it, as you fall in love with it, as it falls in love with you, and you start to really chase tones and sounds, maybe the tones of your heroes, maybe you're trying to, like what you said, revere the tones of your heroes, or if you're trying to dismantle them and go someplace completely different, maybe you're wondering, I want a different kind of amp. So I know that the technology of what makes tube versus solid state versus hybrid, it can be a deep rabbit hole. For me, I'm not real technical in that sense, but I know this. Solid state is like your transistor radio at home. It's the one that everybody can afford and everybody has. Tube amp tends to be that bigger, more expensive piece, and then hybrid is the one that's got all the bells and whistles on it, trying to sort of have a foot in both sides of the room. Tube amps I love because they're so transparent. You hear everything you play, but the downside of a tube amp is you hear everything you play. So it's one of those things you find out what you're good at and what you're bad at, what you need to work on, because that tube amp just puts it out there right in front of everybody that's listening to you, and puts it out right in front of you. So I love tube amps for that very reason, because I have to fight with my guitar. I have to fight with my ability to get to the place that I want to be. But it does become kind of a esoteric thing to talk about, because you can't just go tube amp sound, solid state amp sound, without sometimes sitting down and playing a whole bunch of amplifiers and hearing all the things that can go into it. I think the place you hear it the most is in clean tone, and that's something we were going to talk about today, and we can play some guitars and show some examples of that. I grew up listening to the Beatles. I love the Beatles, and the Beatles, especially in the early days, played Vox amplifiers, which is an English company. And they had a lot of clean tone early because there weren't distortion pedals yet. There weren't a lot of the overdrive hadn't happened. The Kinks hadn't broken their speaker, so they got that sound from You Really Got Me yet. The Beach Boys, on the other hand, sort of the American counterpart to the Beatles, they were playing very clean tones as well, but they were using Fender amps. And so you've got these two amps that have clean sounds, and most people go, oh, clean is clean is clean, and yet they're not the same. Clean tone on a Vox amp is not quite the same as clean tone, and some of it depends on what kind you like better. So, talking about tube amps, talking about clean tone a second ago. So right now I'm playing what is one of my favorite types of guitar, Telecaster, Fender Telecaster, right now through a Vox AC10, which is a 10-watt tube amp of the English variety. And so I've got it, just the EQ is set flat, got a little bit of reverb on it. I'm in the neck pickup on this guitar. And it's, again, has that, it's got that very sort of Beatley tone to it. You think about that, or you think about those early Stone songs. I played badly there for a second, but you think about those tones, and so this is very much a tone that I'm comfortable with. This is like an old pair of jeans I put on. I know exactly what to do when I've got this kind of tone going. cut more, obviously, by changing your pickup, and all of a sudden, haven't changed anything about the amp. It's just it's the guitar going into that amp and what flavors it gives you. What I put into the guitar is my picking, is my fingers, in the fretting, and so the things that I like to do come out very naturally, and they again add to that tone that's going to come out of the amp. The amp being the final ingredient there, taking what your fingers do, taking what your guitar has to offer, and then that's what gives it voice. That's what gives it volume. And for me personally, I love a clean tone on my amps because then I can control all the colors of the sound with pedals. But I have to have a good clean tone to start from because that's kind of the base point. And so that's why I'm talking about that today. So again, this is the Vox kind of clean, and it's one thing, but then you get into playing a Fender. We'll do that in just a second. And that's yet a different type of clean tone. So some of it just depends on what kind of sound you're searching for, what kind of sound you hear in your head, because I think that's always the chase you're really doing. It's not so much the records you grew up with, it's the sound that's inside your head that you can't get away from. So now playing the same guitar through a Fender Supersonic amp. This is a 2-channel amp, whereas the Vox was only one. But again, tube amp, got the EQ set flat on the same pickup on this guitar, but hearing the difference in that clean tone. So one of the things I hear right away, the difference in the reverb. The reverb on the Vox is a little bit less wet sounding. Fenders have a very wet sounding reverb, which when you think about a lot of the great surf music from the 60s and 70s, they were all playing through Fender amps, that very drippy reverb. A lot of the great instrumental groups of those eras using Fender amps for that, and it's got that very punchy, ringing kind of a clean sound. You can hear, you can actually, as I'm sitting in here, when I play those notes, I can hear the metal on the strings, hear that kind of, just the feeling of it vibrating and whapping against the neck, which is very characteristic, I think, to the Fender clean, because it's so, it's almost like it's sitting here in front of the amp, the sound, so representative, so bright, and so spanky, which is, I'm not sure if that's a real word or not, but that's always the word I think of when I'm thinking about Fender. And it just gives you that bright punch kind of thing. And again, I feel like there's a big difference. The types of things I play when I play through a Fender, I tend to leave my pedals alone more because I think, this clean sound is so signature sounding. It's got such a presence all its own. I tend to let the clean do the singing, so to speak. When I'm playing through my Vox, I tend to think, okay, this amp takes these pedals so well, that clean tone really fits well with whatever pedal I might turn on to color the sound, and I tend to go more that route. And that's the guitar hasn't changed, my hands definitely haven't changed, but the sound that gets amplified forth from the two different kinds of amps influences the way I start to play, or the way I start to think from a sonic palette kind of perspective. But I think if you're looking for amps, it's a good thing not just to come in with your preconceived notions, because there was a time I would never have touched a Fender amp, because the Beatles played Vox, especially early on. The Beatles played Vox, they played Rickenbacker, they played Gretsch. So that's what I got to have. And next thing you know, somebody hands me a Telecaster, and my life changed. But the Beatles weren't known for that, so am I somehow going against the rules? And yet I find myself now playing a lot more wide diversity in gear, a lot more wide diversity in influences, because you kind of break out of those ruts of your early thinking in your early days, and now I'm like, Fender's got its place in my sonic palette. The Vox has got its place in my sonic palette. We were talking about some other different amps that we both enjoy. Those have the place in the sonic palette, and I play differently depending on which amp I'm playing through. So the Fender clean, I think, is very different than a Vox clean, and you can stack those up against other amp brands, boutique or large company, and you'll find some differences to all those things. Well, I'm Christopher Ames, and we've been talking clean sound here in the Vault. Just want to say thanks for tuning in and listening to. I've been doing this with Making Music Magazine. Make sure you subscribe to their YouTube channel. Like the video if you like it, leave a comment. If you disagree with me completely, think I'm completely wrong, put it in the comments, let us know what you think. And don't forget to come back for part 2 when we talk about high gain amps and some distortion and a little bit more dirt.